What is up, fam? Back at it again. This live has been too long. I don't even know what the expression for it is. Too long overdue. Yeah, that's what it is. It's been long overdue just because last week had some technical issues, decided just to postpone it a week. And then last night, I actually had to go to a Jazz game, and tonight was open free. So I decided to just do it tonight. But yeah, I'm prepared this time. I have a talk of points I want to talk about, and everything's ready to rock and roll. I'm just gonna hop kind of straight into it and have people join in as they wish. But anyone, I'm not streaming on Facebook anymore. Not dealing with those issues anymore of dual streaming and frame rate dropping and crashing my computer. But I'm streaming on YouTube, and then also I'm live on IG. So if anyone on Facebook, put the link to my YouTube. Anyone on IG, you can stay here on IG. That'd be awesome if you can move over to YouTube. It's in the link in my story, the YouTube link. Show me some love. But this week, I want to talk about the benefits of living abroad, and I don't mean necessarily just meaning abroad, like out of country, international, outside of the continent, halfway across the world. It's just generally kind of moving away from either where you grew up or kind of where you went to college, and having new experiences and meeting new people, making new connections, networking with different people, seeing different ways people in different parts of the country as well as the world interact with each other, how they live day to day life, and how they make money, what kind of hobbies they have, because there's benefit from learning from people that are different from you. And I will talk about that as well. And I'll just go ahead and hop into it. I guess kind of my experiences, I'll start off with that. My experiences living around the country as well as around the world. I'm not the most traveled person by far, but I do think I have lived there's a difference between living somewhere and traveling somewhere. Just because you travel somewhere, that doesn't count as living there. So I'd say living there is an extended period of time, a month to several months to several years counts as living there. Not necessarily, oh, I'm just here for a week or two type of a thing. I'm going around different places, not kind of in one spot. That's not living. So it's just traveling. So my experience with that, like I said, I'm kind of a little bit above average when it comes to different experiences living in different places around the country as well as the world. So starting off, I'm sure a lot of you know, I'm from Dallas, Texas area. Born and raised there. Nothing super crazy or exciting. My family, luckily, unfortunately for me, but they've lived several different places. Parents met in Utah, ended up moving to Hawaii. That's where my mom grew up, and a lot of my siblings were born there, lived there. Very diverse, different cultures, of course, there. And then they ended up moving to Japan for my dad's work, and they lived there for around 5 years. My closest sister, she was born there, and then we moved to Texas. It was either a decision between Chicago and Texas. I'm glad I got raised in Texas, nice and warm. It'd be interesting to see how I turned out if I grew up in Chicago. But I ended up being born in Texas, Dallas area, and great childhood, great area. At that time, when my family moved there, it was pretty low key, not a ton of people moving there. But now it's one of the hottest places to live in the country. A ton of people moving to Texas, especially the DFW area. I was born and raised there, so throughout I was born to graduated high school, went through high school, basically in the same house. Yeah, it was in the same house. I graduated, then we moved houses, but then after I graduated high school, moved over to Utah. I visited before, never lived there. It's the difference. But I did my freshman year at Brigham Young University, and I did 1 year, 2 semesters there. So basically the equivalent of 1 year. And that was really interesting just because in Texas, southern, it's nice and warm. Winters don't get insanely cold, not a ton of snow. Um, Basically everywhere I've been, people are relatively friendly, but a little bit different, a lot more of a LDS church culture in Utah, obviously, just because there's a ton of people in Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and not a lot of that stuff necessarily in Texas. I still had, obviously, there's a lot of members of the church, but pretty much most people here in Utah are members of the LDS, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that way the culture is different. So people are used to church words, church terms. Everyone's kind of going to church, BYU. People are asking, oh, where'd you serve a mission in self-introductions when people in Texas don't even know what the heck a mission is. So very different in that aspect. And then, of course, diversity. I know Utah, you're not very diverse. It's getting there, but I don't think it'll ever get to the point of a lot of these other places that I've lived, just because of the nature of the churches, mainly a certain demographic, and not anything against the church, but there's not a lot of diversity. And most people, a lot of people that are diverse, more people are moving here, but there's not a ton of diversity. For example, I know tons of people that grew up here, and I value diversity and kind of different experiences, different people from different cultures. A lot of people here kind of come from the same background, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but you kind of get stuck in a bubble. And one of the biggest things that a lot of employers that hire from BYU, out of BYU graduates, the biggest thing, especially in the business school, is there's not open, really that as much open to people of different backgrounds and different experiences, and especially things that contradict what people traditionally do here in Utah. They unconsciously shun or put down people that are different than them. So that's why I see the benefit in diversity, and I'm glad I got that in Texas. But yeah, Provo, Utah, great place. Utah's grown on me. But then I did a year at Brigham Young University, my freshman year, and then after I got called to my church mission, LDS mission, and I had the opportunity to live in Tokyo, Japan, which is pretty cool. It's where my family was before I was born. So I got to go back to where they were. I got to go back to my roots. My mom's Japanese, so being able to learn kind of like my mother tongue and be enveloped in that culture, basically my blood. So, and there was totally different from anywhere I've ever lived before. Obviously, the culture is a whole 180 twist. Like, people in here in America, very open. They're very willing to share stuff about themselves. And because America and the US is a big melting pot of a bunch of different cultures, like a lot of stuff is acceptable that necessarily isn't acceptable in Japan. For example, on escalators is like one of the most interesting things I learned kind of first going to Japan. But in escalators, you stand on a certain side of the escalator if you just want to stand there, and then you move over to a different side if you want to walk up. So that was really interesting. In the US, it's kind of like free for all, and going on and off trains and buses, you always wait for the people on the train or the bus to exit before you go onto the bus or train. And whenever people are on the bus or train, you squish together, you make room for people. You always, if you have a backpack or a bag, you always put it to the front of your body so you can allow people to basically make extra room so you can fit more people into the bus or train. And lots of different eating manners and ways they eat. For example, slurpee noodles when you're eating ramen. Never put the chopsticks and stick in the rice, and certain chopstick manners that you need to follow, as well as eating, saying certain words. And the big thing of the language is making sure you're being polite and using honorifics when it's necessary. For example, here in the US, you can kind of like talk slang to anyone and it's fine. You kind of talk normally to you and your friend versus you and your younger sibling, or versus you and your grandparent or another adult. Japan's totally different. It's a hierarchical society, so you have to respect anyone that's older than you, anyone that you don't really know. You use certain verbs and certain words that if you're just talking with you and your friend, or you're talking with you and your younger sibling, then you'd use different words and verbs as well, different conjugations of stuff. So that in itself, the language of the Japanese language itself kind of reflects how their Japanese society is structured and runs. And not only that, food, the culture, the language is obviously different, but the way they did stuff, the way they lived life, transportation was so much better in Japan. Granted, a lot of people in a very small area, public transportation has to be good. So not too many people drove a car. Most people rode bikes or the trains or buses, and it's crazy. In Japan, actually, in order to buy a car, you have to have legal proof that you have a place to park that car, a parking spot. Because if you don't, then you can't buy a car, which is very interesting. Their style and fashion is different. The type, like I said, the types of foods they eat, their mannerisms, everything they do is very different. And that's Japan, and then it's very different in other European countries and other places across the world. So this is like kind of a brief summary of my experience in Japan. I'll kind of go that into a little bit more detail as I dive down into a couple of topics I'm going to talk about. So did my 2 years there, learned the language, learned the culture, and for me being half Japanese, I really connected with the culture and kind of saw myself as I'm part of. I will never be a full Japanese person that was born and raised there and 100% Japanese, but definitely part of me. If I'm around Japanese people of that culture, I'll kind of switch how I act and what I say and basically my behavior. And then after I was in Japan, moved back. As soon as I got back from a mission, was kind of going through school. During the summers, I would do a sales job, summer sales, and where we would go travel different cities around the country for 3 to 4 months and go out and sell stuff, sell pest control. And I thought it was a really cool experience, the sales part itself, but I think a big thing I learned that was a benefit to myself was just living in different places, talking with different people, getting to know people's different stories. Just because my first summer, I was in Austin, Texas. Obviously, I'm very familiar with that. I was born and raised there, but Dallas is very different from Austin. And you can say the same thing with Houston, San Antonio. They're all very different, unique, different demographic, especially politically, culturally, racially, ethnically. Lots of different people from all different parts of the world, just because, especially now, it's becoming one of the big business and tech hubs of the country. A lot of people are moving from California, from New York, from out of the country to Austin, Texas. So I was able to interact with tons of people from a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different ideologies and ways of thinking as well. So I was in Austin, Texas, and then the next summer, we spent a little bit of time in Arizona. We were around a month, so like Phoenix, Gilbert. What's that other area in Arizona? We didn't go to Tempe, but Arizona, the landscape was so much different. The types of houses. We're in the summer. It's super hot. It's like 115, 120 degrees outside. Not much greenery, obviously, because it's the desert. Different things to do, different people there, different way of life. So that was a really unique experience. We were there for about a month, and then this was during COVID. So we eventually moved to California, where we're supposed to go, in Bay Area, California. So California, way different from Arizona, way different from Texas. Super nice weather, beaches, and we were in the northern part of California. So even Northern California and Southern California, totally different. You ever ask or talk to Northern Californian versus Southern California, they don't even really relate to each other. They don't even say Northern California and Southern California in the same state. But I was up in Northern California, Bay Area, east to Bay. So spent a lot of time in the city and on our weekends, but we're mainly in like Pleasanton, Livermore, a lot of those areas. Danville, San Ramon. But similar to Austin, obviously it's a lot more big in tech over there with the Silicon Valley. A lot of people that work these tech jobs, the Silicon Valley jobs, living East Bay and working in the city or working in Silicon Valley. So lots of people, different people, like I said, same with Austin, different ideologies, different politics, different people from all around the world, from Europe to Asia to Africa, Australia, different parts, North America, South America, just a whole slew of different types of people. It was crazy there. One of the first things that I thought was really cool, we were in this one area and they literally had like live wild peacocks, which I didn't even know those existed in the US. But they're there in California, so that was pretty sick. And then that next summer, we went from California to Memphis, Tennessee. So a place with some of the highest real estate in the country to Memphis, Tennessee, which literally I'm pretty sure is the lowest and the cheapest real estate in the entire nation. So a lot of different backgrounds. It's a predominantly African American population. So that was obviously very different than Utah and California, like the Bay Area. Some of the cities that we're in were very different from Memphis, Tennessee. So getting to know people from different backgrounds, a little bit lower socioeconomic levels for sure. And things are just different there. The way people operated, fast food was not fast food. You go to the only restaurant, like fast food restaurant that was fast, you can go through the drive-through in probably less than, I'd say 5 to 10 minutes. It's Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A is the GOAT. But you go to like McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Popeyes, like any of those other fast food joints, they are so slow. They literally have 2 people working in. They're the laziest people working in there. It takes you 30 minutes to get your food, and you're the only person in line. So, and that's more of like the Midwest. So real estate obviously is a lot cheaper, a lot bigger homes in some neighborhoods. A lot more is very flat, like kind of like Texas, but with its own unique like weather patterns. It was kind of like rainy a lot, and it wasn't like insanely hot, but it still got kind of hot. And the city was very different. Got to go to a Grizzlies game and then visit Nashville, the country music capital of the world, and yeah, a lot of different people, a lot more, I'd say, country people out there, kind of just living their lives, not living in a big city. A lot of people working for FedEx, so kind of that aspect of it. And yeah, after that summer, I moved back to Utah, and then this past summer, I was in Austin, Texas again, more northern Austin, like Round Rock area. That was my internship was at, instead of South Austin, which was where I was at a couple of years earlier. But needless to say, I was able to live in a lot of different places. I've lived out of the country. I've lived in the South. I've lived in kind of like the Midwest. I've lived in the West Coast. The only place I haven't really lived is the East Coast. So I was looking at jobs in like North Carolina, South Carolina, New York, Massachusetts. There's a big hub for the company I'm going to work for in Boston area. So that could potentially be a place I want to go. But I definitely want to experience the East Coast, and I definitely know that's a different perspective than West Coast, Midwest, the South. So that's a potentially a place that I'd visit in the future, or like to try living in the future. But needless to say, most people, they kind of grow up in a certain state or area or city. They graduate high school. Maybe they go to a different college in a different state. A lot of people tend to stay in the same state. Then they graduate. Then they kind of might move one place for a job, end up coming back home and just kind of like living their life, especially dudes. I know lots of people that, and the church population is very unique because a lot of us go on missions, and especially international missions. But they like grow up wherever they grew up. They go to college, they go on their mission, they come back to college, and then kind of like maybe go back to where they live. But they haven't really lived like other places. And the thing is, most people, they like comfort. Like, for example, I'm from Texas, so it was high up on my list to go back. But specifically, I don't want to stay in Dallas because that's where I'm from. I want to meet new people. I want to be somewhat close where I can like come visit. Not necessarily saying I would like to stay there like for the rest of my life, or even super long term, but it's close enough, but further away enough I can meet new people, make new connections, so forth. But there's tons of benefits from living in different places, states, countries especially. And I'm going to dive into that. Kind of first want to highlight kind of my background, where I've lived, my experiences with that. First point I want to hit, there's a difference, huge difference between travel and actually living in a new city or country. Few of the differences. When you travel, you're usually not staying in one place for very long. For example, my dad and my stepmom, they're going to go to Spain and they're going to visit Madrid and Barcelona. Excuse me. Those are the typical cities that people visit. And they'll be there for around like 3 days in each city. They're only there for a week. Yeah, they get to do a lot of the touristy stuff, but that's the thing. When you're there for travel, you're a tourist. You act like a tourist. People treat you like a tourist. You're not there for that long, so you don't get to experience life as a local. And that's exactly what they're going to do. There's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but there's a huge difference. Just because you travel a lot to places doesn't mean you don't get all the benefits from actually like living somewhere long term or longer term and experiencing kind of what an average person living in that city or country will experience on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, year-to-year basis. So when you travel, you're a tourist, you're not a local. And when you live there, you get to experience what it's like to be a local. And the thing is, whenever you're a tourist, you're visiting somewhere for a little bit, travel, people treat you like a foreigner and you're just visiting. So you get away with a ton of stuff because there's a lot of stuff in culture, especially Japanese culture. People go and they don't really adhere to the Japanese society just because they're only there for a little bit. They don't really know any better. And the thing is, if you're only there for like a week or two, there's no way you're going to learn the whole culture, exactly what to do living in Japan, how to live within their society that they've built for themselves. And that includes like culture, manners, food, how to treat people, what side of the road to walk on, places to go to visit, places not to, dangerous places, safe places. Yeah, I mean, think of like Hawaii too. It's like you have the Waikiki, North Shore, the place that all tourists go, but then you also have the other beaches that the locals know, and it's kind of like locals only. So you only get to know that by being a local and actually living there for a long term rather than just visiting. So when you're actually living in a new place, you don't get away with being a foreigner. You're expected to kind of like learn the culture, learn the manners, act a specific way, talk a specific way, especially if it's a country with a different language. You're kind of expected to learn that language, and you should. I mean, think of people migrating to the U.S., in the United States, and our main language is obviously English. But it's one thing if foreigners, they don't really know the language, so you kind of like help them out. But someone who's been here for years or months or decades even, and they never really make an effort to learn the language, you kind of get a lot of people would get upset about that. And just because you're here for so long, like you need to invest and actually learn the way of life that people native to this country live. So you kind of adapt yourself to it, but then also bring your uniqueness and whatever culture you come from. There's always benefit for that. So those are the main differences between traveling and actually living. So traveling, you kind of get exposed to different cultures, but you don't spend enough time actually living that culture for it to make like a huge impact and really change your life and your perspective and the way you act, type of thing. So there are multiple different benefits, I believe, in living abroad. There are a number of them, just like listing out. I'll dive into kind of a lot of them in a little bit more detail, but stepping out of your comfort zone, developing cultural awareness, making friends from all over the world, interacting with different people from all around the world, having more opportunities to go visit places and go experience different cultures and foods and different experiences that can ultimately build your different perspective. And then learning how to effectively like manage yourself in like a monetary, a finance aspect, and also a cultural and interacting with people management skills. Just because people are going to be different from you, you're going to be different from the people that are native in that country or city. So you kind of have to adapt. And nowadays, some people kind of like, oh, I'm just kind of like who I am, I'm not going to change type of a thing. If you go to a different country and you kind of have that attitude, like, you'll learn real quick that a lot of that stuff doesn't fly. So you need to learn to adapt to the culture and to the circumstances that you're in. Learning new languages, managing those different relationships that you make with people different from you, different food, expanding your professional connections, bettering your career prospects. Just because someone who's well versed internationally and globally, we live in an international global society now. There's no way of getting around it. And the cool thing about my internship over the summer, and what I'm going to probably be doing full time, is I had people on my team from all around the world. I had people on my team from Slovenia, Slovakia, from India, from Canada, from Mexico, from Japan, from Singapore, from China, like literally all facets around the world. People were a part of my team, and I got to interact with them. And with me having some international experience and interactions with just life experiences, working and living among and experiencing different cultures and peoples, like that gave me a huge step up, because I was able to say like, hey, someone made a connection. They live in Japan, and I was able to talk with them in Japanese and talk to them about like different places and things I enjoyed when I was living in Japan, not just visiting. And you can really make a connection with people, and you can learn from new people as well. And that's the whole point of life, is kind of like taking and learning from different things that are unique to your, that are different from yourself and that you're not very familiar with, and learning those things and seeing the benefits of them and applying them into your life. So career, obviously, and dealing with hard, difficult situations. Like, most likely, if you're living kind of a new state, a new country, you're going to be away from friends, you're going to be away from family, you're going to have to make new friends, and it's tough. And like I said, naturally, people want to be around people they're familiar with, places they're familiar with, culture they're familiar with, food they're familiar with, and you just kind of get complacent. You don't really learn any new stuff. You don't interact with any new people. You kind of get in an echo chamber where you're just kind of like same thing all the time. That's why I'm a big proponent of living abroad, experiencing new people, meeting new people from different places, trying new things. So dealing with hard and difficult situations, just because you can't just be like, all right, I'm going to head down the street, or I'm going to hop on a quick hour flight back home to visit my parents, or whatever. And my parents can go visit me. For halfway around the world, it's probably not going to happen. So dealing with hard and difficult situations. Diversity. I think this world, so many people are diverse, and I'm a big proponent of diversity. Making friends with so many different people from different backgrounds, getting to know people, just because everyone has a story, and you never want to be in a group that everyone has the same story. Just because if everyone has the same story, everyone has the same background, you're probably all going to the same place in the future, and there's no room for growth and for learning. Versus if you're in a room or you're in a group of people all over the world, Asia, South America, North America, Europe, Australia. I already said Asia, but Asia. You get to learn different perspectives, and then you can learn from those people and really see what the world has to offer. Just because if you live your whole life in Provo, Utah, you're not going to know what the world has to offer. And the more you can open your eyes and experience kind of different things, I'd say the higher quality of your life can be. So diversity. And then obviously internationally, I am a guy. I enjoy company of women. So international women are always a plus. All right. But a couple of the ones I wanted to focus on is, I guess I'll start with the whole stepping out of your comfort zone. I mean, I talked about that earlier. As a tourist, you're somewhat stepping out of your comfort zone, but you're still treated as a tourist. You're treated as a foreigner. People don't really give you that responsibility. You don't have that responsibility to learn the language, to learn the culture. You can kind of get by. But if you're living somewhere long term, you got to go to the grocery store every week. You got to know how to use the bathroom, especially living in a maybe not the biggest city, somewhere where not a ton of people speak English. Then if they see the same person every single time, they're going to kind of expect you to learn that language and learn their way of life. As well as, and this kind of relates to learning a new language, so I'll kind of um, segue over to that one. But learning a new language, I'm a big proponent of learning a new language. Not only is it stimulates yourself intellectually, but it expands your horizons and being able to connect with other people from other cultures and other countries. Just because you can never, for example, the United States is very unique that so many different people from so many different cultures, like the only kind of like Americans are like Native Americans, and honestly, there's not that many Native Americans. But the U.S. and being an American is very unique, just because like there's no other than Native Americans, like no one's really like all right. Like I was like kind of we have our own culture. It's kind of like a melting pot of a bunch of different cultures. Versus say somewhere like Japan or somewhere like let me think, somewhere like Saudi Arabia or somewhere in the Middle East or some like Thailand or somewhere where a lot of the indigenous people still live there and they shape their culture and their language and everything. You can never really understand those people until you learn their language, just because a lot of their culture stems from the language. For example, Japan. I mean, I was there for 2 years. There's some expressions that literally can only be expressed in Japanese. They have a literal English translation to it, but it won't mean the same thing. It doesn't have the same feel. And it's way different connecting with someone who they could be fluent in English and be able to express kind of everything they want to. But like I said, there's certain nuances, certain expressions, certain words that only can be can't be literally translated to another language, that only can be understood in Japanese. And the same is with a lot of these other cultures and languages around the world as well. And learning a new language, you get to expand your skills. You get to be kind of more marketable. Obviously, English is kind of the global international language for all countries. If you're going to work internationally, you have to know English, which I'm glad that's my first language. But doing business in Japan, you can speak Japanese, you're going to have a leg up. You're going to have a leg up and dealing with Japanese people, Japanese corporations. And the same with like if you're working with a German company and you speak German, you're going to connect with those people a lot more, even though they're fluent in English. They really appreciate that you taking the time to learn their language and participate in their language and culture. So that will help you business wise. And then, of course, just because you go to a country, especially as Americans, we think like, oh, everyone speaks English, but that's not the case. You travel around, a lot of people don't speak a lick of English. So being able to learn their language, communicate with people, live daily life with people that have no idea any English whatsoever is a big benefit. All right, I really want to hit this business opportunity because, like I said, we live in a global, international society, especially when it comes to business. And if you don't take into account other cultures, other people around the world, and you just think of like, oh, the market's like 100% in the US, and then you're like, you're missing out on so much money and so much opportunity. Just because, I mean, the US is awesome. I think it's the greatest country in the world, and I hope it stays the greatest country in the world. But there are other countries that are killing it too. Like, think of Dubai. Like, people think, oh, like people in LA, Beverly Hills, it's like insane, like levels of wealth. You go to Dubai, dude, like people's license plate, not even their car. They have a license plate worth more than their cars. 500, a million, $20 million a license plate, not even including the car. And just insane levels of wealth. Like, you think you'll see a lot of like Lambos and Porsches and stuff in LA. Like, I've never been to Dubai, but from people I know that have been to Dubai, like the wealth level is insane, especially in the Middle East. Like, literally these oil families and these governments that were built by oil and funded by oil, they're spending billions of dollars like we're spending single dollars. Like, we buy something at Chick-fil-A for like a meal for 10, $15. Like, to them, to us, like spending 10 or 15 bucks is like them spending 10 to 15 billion dollars or $1 million. It's insane. So you really expand your goals and kind of like what you could possibly achieve in life, just because there's a lot of people in a lot of different parts of the world that are a lot better at doing what we think we're already really good at. Innovation. You think you're really good at coding? Go check out people in India. Like, they are some of the best coders, if not the best coders in the world. If you think of other tech people, Japan, China, you think we're doing really well, or like in the science, the STEM fields, go over to those countries. They're kicking our butt. You can see in different test scores and innovation. And right now, I'd say the U.S. leads innovation, but unless we keep that up and make it a priority, I can easily see a lot of other countries taking our place. And not just with innovation, but just a lot of other things as well. So we tend to stay in this bubble and think about that's just within the United States. Like, some people have their bubble within their own city. It's like, oh, cool, I'm the richest guy, or I'm like the strongest guy, or I'm the fastest guy in my city. Well, there's always another city, and there's another state that someone's probably twice as rich as you, twice as hardworking as you, and it really puts things in perspective, and you can really level yourself up to the ultimate level that you can be by comparing the best of the best versus the best where you're at. And so that's like the business side of it, and new levels of wealth. Like, it's insane when you go internationally. And let's see other benefits of living abroad. I think it gives you a base. Obviously, everyone can't live abroad, and I'm young. I'm 25. I'm single. I'm not married. I don't have any kids. So my ability to, when I was doing sales, to move every single summer, I wasn't tied down to any place. It's a lot more feasible. It's a lot more, just because I don't have as much risk for myself versus if I had a family. If I had like 3 kids, 2 kids, 1 kid, you want to be a little bit more established and a little more rooted in one place. But I also think whenever I get married, I start having kids, like even in my when they're younger, I'd love to work internationally, move to different cities, have them have that experience, just because there is benefit, and I think it's good to have a family raised in kind of one place, but there's also benefits to for them experiencing different places, living in different countries, living in different states, different cities as well, just because they get that diversity. If someone, like I said, I kind of knock on Utah a lot, but to be honest, there's not a lot of diversity. If someone's just like born and raised in Utah, kind of like lived their whole life in Utah, they kind of, if they move somewhere else, they're like, oh wow, the world's totally different, because they're literally living in a bubble. And it gives your kids and it gives your family good foundation of, like I said, we live in a global society. You can't just like live under a rock anymore. Just live in your hometown. We have social media, we have the internet. So being able to interact with people that are different from you without coming off as offensive or self-righteous is very important, a very important skill. So that is from a family perspective, just because I know that's not feasible for everyone, but I think everyone should experience it as well. Um, that's actually a lot of the points I wanted to hit. And the cool thing is you make friends and you live in different parts of the world. You have connections with anyone all around the world. It's cool when you're like connected with everyone in the city, but there's always another city. So being able to spread your net out wide and it's like, hey, actually, like, you remember that guy I worked with in Japan or whatever? He's actually living in like Cambodia, or he's living in Thailand. Just having those connections of, say you visit somewhere over there, do you have a place to stay? There's some connections, they can show you around. Or especially in business, I think this is very crucial in business, is just knowing people that, hey, I know a guy that lives over here in this city, in this country, that does this. And then he knows someone that does that. And then I also know someone in this other city that does this. I'm building a house, or I'm looking at real estate deals. Hey, I know a guy in Vegas. Got off the phone with my friend Isaac. He lives in Vegas. He's looking at commercial real estate deals all the time. Like, hey, if I want to get into that space, I know a guy over there. So it's good to know people in many different parts of the country, the state, the world, just because you never know what doors or opportunities could arise from that. But there are tons of benefits of living abroad. Obviously, there are some negatives of living abroad, especially if you have family. It's tough to move teenagers halfway across the world to China, to Europe, or whatever. So I would suggest doing it when they're smaller. You have a little bit younger family. Once you're a little bit older, you can be a little bit more established, and then you can actually go back and visit those places because your kids will remember memories, and they can be raised up in different cultures, and they have different friends from all around the world, and it's a really cool opportunity. And unfortunately, I was born and raised in Texas, but a lot of my siblings, they got to experience that, and luckily I got to experience that on my mission too, being international. Um, and I'm trying to think of some other cons. Obviously, there's some. I think the U.S. is clearly the best country in the world to live in from standard of living perspective and opportunity perspective. But there are a lot of really good places as well, and there's a lot of not very good places. For example, I probably never moved to like Honduras or Nicaragua, and like one, they're typically not very safe countries. Two, it's probably not like a lot economically going on business wise, and there's a lot of places that aren't attractive to live there, maybe to visit, but you want to pinpoint kind of like key hubs, and I think big cities. You can kind of start with that. All right, in Europe, you got London, you got Dublin, Ireland, you got Frankfurt, you got Berlin, you have Madrid, Barcelona, Lisbon, you have Paris, you have Rome, just in Europe, and then Eastern Europe's kind of crazy right now. But when everything's settled down, like you got Moscow, you got Kiev, and whenever you got Turkey, got Istanbul, and then the Middle East. I think that'd be a really cool country to possibly live in. You got Dubai. I definitely want to. If I had the opportunity, I'd 100% live in Dubai. And then East Asia, you have like India, New Delhi. You have like Indonesia, Jakarta. You have obviously Tokyo, Fukuoka, Sapporo, Osaka. You have Beijing, you have Shanghai, you have Hong Kong, you have Taiwan, Taipei, you have Sydney, Australia, Hamilton, New Zealand. You have like a ton of different options to kind of like stem, and then from there, and at the end of the day, like I think my dream, and I'd suggest to a lot of people as well. I know my guy Rich Cooper, he's a big fan, and eventually I want to be this too. But you're like a location independent. A lot of people are location dependent. So, for example, they have a job. Like a basic example is a factory job. You have a factory job. You have to go to the factory every single day in order to make money or make a living. Yeah, that's location dependent. If you're location independent, for example, a remote job, or you run your own business, that's a service-based business. You don't have to deal with any physical products. Doesn't matter where in the world you're going to be. You have a consulting business, you can do it. You have a client in New York, you can literally hop on a call from halfway around the world in Beijing and be able to run your business, do your work. I think that's the ideal. So if you have a location independent job like that, then you can live anywhere in the world and have these experiences, and then you can have these benefits as well. So that's one of the keys. If you're definitely try to look for a location. Obviously, there's some occupations and stuff like you're a doctor, if you're a nurse, you even to a certain extent, like if you're like a lawyer or something, that you have to be in a certain geographic area, then that's kind of how it is. But I'm a big fan of location independent occupations, businesses. That way, you have the opportunity to do stuff like this. Like I said, there's a lot of benefits that come from it. But It's not going to be as long today just because there's a lot of different benefits. And I guess if anyone has any questions, you can let me know in the comments. If you have any other ideas for potential lives in the future, let me know other topics you want to hit on. As with everything, like I said, I was trying to make you guys stronger, smarter, healthier, wealthier. So whatever that entails, any questions, money, game, status, dating, self-improvement, fashion, style, looking good, feeling good, let me know. I can make more topics. Obviously, look out for my posts on my Instagram, on my Facebook page. Join my Facebook page. Just trying to reach out to a different audience. And then I want to eventually post more stuff out here on YouTube. YouTube, a little bit more long form content. Instagram, a little bit more of my short form content. But let me know in the comments what you want to hear in the future, and stay classy. Have a good night.